Then we're going to do the RNAV 3-4 right with a CDUG transition. Just pretend Chuck is CDUG. It's basically the same point. Now, as far as the non-precision approach goes, we do the approach in VNAV. The history of non-precision approaches is that once upon a time we used to do this with vertical speed, and it used to be called dive and drive. And so we'd go from, let's say we're doing this approach, we'd go from 5,000 to, oh yeah, Clues isn't in here either. Yeah, this is incomplete because this is quite a while ago. You're going to see now we're going to have CDUG, Neil, after Neil, Clues, and then Buck. And Clues will be at 4,000. So if you were going from Neil to Clues, we would have 4,000 in the window, open the VS window, and then we go down and capture that 4,000. And then after Clues, we go down to Buck, we'd have 2,200 in the window. As we approach, open the VS window, put in vertical speed of, depending on what the distance is, at least 1,000 feet a minute, if not a little more, and then capture the altitude. And we'd be in steps like that until you get to the MDA, and then you use vertical speed to dive and drive to capture the MDA. And we're not going to discuss how to do that. There's a particular technique to capture the MDA. But then, as time went on, we started to use the vertical speed constant angle. And that would be kind of like a ILS approach, where it's more constant and not configuration, not going down, leveling off, down, level off, down, hit the MDA, level off. Now there's the runway, establish a descent to not end up high. This is more of a constant angle all the way down. And then, of course, as time went on, then you have the 747-8, which can do IAN approach, which is integrated approach navigation. And we'll talk about that when we get to the -8. So it has advanced, but the way we use it now is VNAV non-precision approach would be a constant angle approach using VNAV. So if we're not in VNAV, we have to get in VNAV. Like you can see here, he's descending in flight level change down to 5,000. And once we go to 5,000, reach 5,000, we're going to have to get into VNAV here to then go from CDUG to Neil to Clues to Buck to the runway. Now, we could also be in VNAV this whole way, and we wouldn't have to be in flight level change here. We could be in VNAV, and we could be right on the path. And so it depends whether you're, descending in flight level change. At some point, you're going to have to get in VNAV to do the VNAV non-precision approach. If you're already in VNAV, you're probably established already, and then we just have to make sure we do the steps to descend from this point to this point to this point to this point. So one of the acronyms we use for this is to, and let's say we've done this. We've gone flight level change down to 5,000. We get to 5,000. We capture the altitude. It goes speed alt. We level at 5,000 feet, and now we're approaching Chuck, which is CDUG, and we're getting ready for the approach. And now we want to get into VNAV. Well, how do we do that? Well, here's the steps we use. There's an acronym called LAVS, L-A-V-S, and that is that actually came, I think it originated from Delta. I think they're the ones that originated this. And it's a way to remember what to do in the mode control panel to get into VNAV. And it's good to kind of know what to do because you can screw this up. So the L stands for localizer or LNAV. What are you going to be doing this approach in? Is it going to be an LNAV? In the case of an RNAV approach, yeah, it's going to be an LNAV because there's no localizer. If the ILS is tuned, we're going to park it. And we go to the NavRad page and park it because we don't want it displayed if we're doing a non-precision approach. So the first L is localizer or LNAV. What are we going to be using? If it's a localizer approach, we're going to be using loc mode. If it's anything else, we're going to be using LNAV, VOR, RNAV, NDB, They're all going to be LNAV. The A stands for set the next lower altitude in your MCP window. So if we're level at 5,000 and we're going to be approaching CDUG, we're going to set our next lower altitude, which is 4,000 in the MCP. Then there's kind of an intermediate step here, and this step is good. Some people don't do this. You don't have to do it, but I find it's a lot smoother to do this, is to enter your current speed on the active VNAV page. So you can notice here we've already configured to flaps 10. We're kind of ready to go down here. So we're already at flaps 10 and we're at a speed of 167. Well, you could put that 167 in the scratch pad, go to the VNAV, which you should be on the VNAV descent page. That should be active. And then you can put that current speed on the select speed line, and it'll change that selected speed to 167 and then execute it. And what that's going to do is, the reason you're doing that is because when you go into VNAV, that window will blank, the speed will jump to try to go to 226, and then you're going to end up hearing the power go vroom as it increases, and you're going to have to come up here and push the selector and bring the speed back to 167. And so you got the power going up, and it's coming way back. And so to avoid that, you could simply say, okay, I'm at flaps 10, I'm at 167, put 167 on the selected speed on the descent page and execute. And so what that does is it now, when you go to VNAV, the window blanks and the speed stays at 167, doesn't budge. And then you're going to open the window anyway, and it'll be open at 167. So this is kind of an intermediate step. You got LA, and then after that would be enter your current speed on the active VNAV page, which should be the descent page. Then the next step is the V, LAV. The V would be, are you going to be using VNAV or VS? Now again, nowadays we use VNAV. We don't use vertical speed. But if you were doing something with vertical speed, you could use vertical speed mode as well. That would be the V. And then the S would be to speed intervene, or if you're using vertical speed, set your speed. So in this case, we're going to open the window, and the window will open to our 167 that we put in here, that we put on the descent page. Again, if you didn't, you might be opening this and it might say 216, and now you got to bug it back to 167, and the power is going to go up and down, So, and nothing wrong with that, but it's just, it's a little more smooth to do it the other way. And then after the V, or after the S, after the speed intervene, the fifth step would be check VNAV path is on your FMA. And if you got VNAV path, well, you're ready. You got a lower altitude, you're in VNAV, you're at your speed for flap 10, you speed intervened, and you got VNAV path. Okay, it's ready to go down now. It's ready to start down on the path, down to the next altitude, which is 4,000. So that LAVS, again, that's a good thing to use. It's L, and I'll probably point this out on maybe another video where we'll go look at the profile that Boeing has for a non-precision approach, and you can apply this LAVS to that diagram. They don't do that, but the LAVS works real nice to remember what to do. L, localizer or LNAV, and we're in this case, LNAV. A, set your next lower altitude, 4,000. What flap setting am I at now? 10, 167. Go to the VNAV page, descent page, put in 167, execute, and then push VNAV. Window blanks, but the speed's not going anywhere because you put the 167 in, and then open the window. And then it'll be right there at 167. And the last thing is check VNAV path, because if it's not in VNAV path, it's not going down. If it's in VNAV out, we take another action, but we want to see VNAV path there. And then as we start down, it looks like we're still at flaps 10 here. We start down, and the altitude range arc is going to show based on your current vertical rate. And again, we're on the path, and we're at a certain vertical speed, and that arc is going to show that we're going to cross buck, or in this case, buck. In our case, it'll be Clues at 4,000. Not Neil would be at 5,000 actually. So this is all old. But you'll use the altitude range arc to assess that you're going to cross that buck altitude at 2,200 feet. And once you see that you got that 2,200 foot made, you can set your next lower altitude. So in our case, it'll be when we see we have 4,000 made at Clues, we can set the next altitude, which would be 2,200 at buck. And so forth and so on until we get to the final approach fix, which is going to be buck in this case. And then what we're going to do is when we see we have 2,200 foot made at buck, because that's the altitude of buck, 2,200, we're going to set our MDA in there, whatever that is. Here, let's say it's 870. I don't know what it is on that approach. We'll have to look at it. But what we would do then is set the next lower altitude on the MCP. I can't set 870. I can set 900. I can set 800. I can't set 870. So I'm going to set the next lower altitude, the next lower 100 feet in the MCP, which should be 800. And now I'm going to configure. Maybe I'm at gear down flaps 20 already. Looks like we are. And then we'll go to flap 30. I want to be fully configured by 2 miles from the final approach fix. In other words, I want to be established, fully configured by 2 miles from that FAF. I don't want to be inside of that. Some people put a circle around here, 2 miles, on the fix page. They put a 2 mile circle to remind them that they want to be fully configured by that 2 nautical miles. And then when we pass buck at 2,200, again, the gear's down, the flaps are 30, we're clear to land, we're inside a buck. And now once we're in at the final approach fix and less than, and here's the thing, LAVS is accomplished and the gear is down and flaps are 20 by 2 miles from the final approach fix. You want to be fully configured so you're ready to go down and you're stabilized. So by 2 nautical miles, we want to be fully configured. And once we're inside a buck, or at buck or inside of it, and once we pass that final approach fix, and we're more than 300 feet below the missed approach altitude, and in this case, our missed approach altitude is, this probably isn't right, but it's 2,100 feet. So 300 feet below 2,100 would be 1,800. So as long as you're below 1,800 feet, you could now take your window here and set it to the missed approach altitude. You're taking it from that 800 feet and you're setting it up to your missed approach altitude. I think it's higher than 2,100 now. This is old. But in this case, you can see we're at 1,600. So we're not, now if it was at 1,900, I'd have to wait till 1,800 because it could recapture. That's the whole deal here, is you want to make sure it doesn't recapture. And it shouldn't, because you're in approach logic, and that's another thing that's approach logic, and you're in that. So that allows you to keep the window open here and still stay on the path. It says VNAV path. Usually when you open the window here, it goes from VNAV path to VNAV speed, but approach logic prevents it from doing that. So when you open the window, you're still going to stay in VNAV path. And that's what we want to be in. So the whole criteria here is when you're at buck, at the final approach fix, or just inside of it, and you're more than 300 feet below the missed approach altitude, set the missed approach altitude. And that's what we've done here. We're at 1,600, we're below 1,800, we can set 2,100. And now when we get to minimums, which is 870, we make the decision to continue or land. Continue and land or go around. Nothing's in sight at the MDA, we're going around. But meanwhile, it's kind of like an ILS here. You're at a constant angle, you're going down, you hit the MDA, nothing's in sight, bingo, you're going down. If something is in sight, then you have to disconnect the autopilot by 50 feet below the MDA and do a manual landing. So you have to have the visibility and the runway environment in sight, in order to then disconnect by 50 feet below the MDA, at which point you become a manual landing. Because again, it's not an ILS, it's a non-precision approach. So we have to disconnect by 50 feet below the MDA. With an RNAV approach is what we're going to be doing. There's a DA, there's a decision altitude. It's treated just like an ILS. So in that case, when we get to the DA, it's either see it and disconnect and land, or it's go around. So again,